Greetings. In this video, we're going to take a look at what we call monetary measures. And this is really beginning to be the foundation of what we're going to be talking about in Unit 3, which is monetary policy. We first need to know these monetary measures and how they connect. And once we know how the monetary measures connect, then we're going to be talking about how a central bank, in the case of the United States, the Federal Reserve System, can manipulate the money supply and what effect that has on the macroeconomy. So that becomes a big issue as we move forward. You see here that I've already written down some material. This is some monetary data, hypothetical monetary data. And let me just go through some of these little red notes I put around it. I realize some of the red notes are behind my video, so I'll explain all of this. Again, strongly recommend that you take notes. And you're going to see problems like this on future quizzes and future exams. In fact, this problem will not only be on your Unit 2 exam, it'll be on your final exam. So this is an important problem, that you understand these concepts and then you understand how these concepts connect with one another. Okay, so just a few comments and then we're going to begin to play around with this data. First and foremost, monetary data is a stock, which indicates that it's measured at a point in time. So money is not a flow. Money is a stock measure, and you need to note that. The second point I'd like to make is when we talk about deposits, we'll assume the M2 definition. So we'll be including demand deposits, saving deposits, and time deposits in this measure of deposits. So really all deposits are being included in this data. Just a comment about currency. This is currency in circulation. Currency in the United States would be Federal Reserve notes that are actually produced by the U.S. Department of Treasury and issued by the Federal Reserve System. You'll be learning more about that. And if the currency is in circulation, it's outside the banking system. So any cash or currency that's being held by parties outside the banking system, which would be most of the currency out there is outside the banking system, that is in circulation. Now, if the currency is in the bank's vault, if any currency that's in bank vaults is not in circulation, that is part of reserves. So there's currency circulating, which is outside the banking system, and there's currency that is not circulating, that's been issued but not circulating, and that's going to be in bank vaults. Reserves not only include vault cash, but reserves also include any bank deposits with the Fed. So banks can actually have accounts. Banks have accounts with the Federal Reserve System, which is the central bank, and any funds in those accounts, those are electronic measures. It's not paper. A deposit, remember, is electronic. So banks actually bank with the Federal Reserve System, and if they have funds on deposit with the Fed, those are considered to be reserves. Okay? It's really important you begin to button down what these different terms mean if you're going to understand how to put them together and do some of the things we're going to be doing. Okay, so let me go ahead and move this up. We want to do this problem. And again, I recommend you take notes here. So, you have this ability with a video to stop it and to write things down. And I strongly encourage that you take these notes down and actually work with them and process them. Okay, now the first monetary measure we want to look at is something called the monetary base. So let me go back to black here, and the monetary base is a fairly simple measure. Let me move these up a little bit so I can have some space here to write. So the monetary base is nothing more than currency in circulation plus bank reserves. So that's a very simple calculation, monetary base. You'll be learning more about the monetary base and how it fits into monetary policy. It's a big piece of monetary policy later on. So any currency, this is currency in circulation, or any reserves. Reserves would be currency in vaults, bank vaults, as well as any deposits banks have with the central bank, in this case the Fed. So in this particular problem, the reserves are 1,100 and the currency is 400. This is currency in circulation. You can see in this particular set of data that this is not a very currency-driven system. And as a proportion of the total money supply, you'll see that in a minute, not much of it is in the form of currency. And most developed monetary systems have relatively little currency working in them. It's mostly electronic money, as we've talked about. So the monetary base here is made up of two pieces, and when you put those two pieces together, you get $1,500. Okay, then if we take currency, we're going to do another measure here. If we take currency and add it to deposits, this should be very familiar to you already. Currency in circulation plus deposits equals what we call the actual money supply. And this we would call M2 today. Okay? Now, again, currency is 400. And the question is, what are your deposits? Well, we go up top and we can see that our deposits are 8,000. And again, most money in circulation here, only 5% of the money is in the currency is only 5% of deposits. So that's a relatively small amount of currency. So the actual money supply is $8,400. Okay. In the United States, as I've mentioned before in one of our videos, currency is about 10% of the money supply. So currency as a percentage of the actual money supply is about 10% in the U.S. economy, and that percentage stays pretty constant over time. And as I've said, I've mentioned this in a few earlier videos, most currency, quote unquote, in circulation is not circulating in the United States. Estimates are well over half of it's circulating somewhere outside the states. Again, it's really hard to track data and do research on data because currency is being held by foreigners, and then there's a lot of currency that's being used by people for illegal transactions, for instance, drug deals and drug trade. And how do you do research on drug trade? If we knew about drug trade, if we were researching drug trade and could discover all these patterns, we'd stop it, right? So it's difficult to do research on illegal activity, whatever that illegal activity is. All right, so one thing you're going to need to be able to calculate is something called the monetary base. Another thing you're going to need to be able to calculate is something called the actual money supply. Okay, those are two calculations that you'll most certainly have to do on your Unit 2 exam and also on your final exam. Not threatening you, encouraging you to learn this, okay? All right, now, if you take the actual money supply, if you take the actual money supply and divide it by the monetary base, you're going to get the money multiplier. Yeah, we can actually calculate the size of the multiplier effect. So let's go ahead and do that. So monetary base divided by the actual money supply equals the actual, I'm not going to call it the actual money multiplier. I don't call it that in the book, but I'm going to call it I have called it the maximum money multiplier. I guess in the book I do call it the actual money multiplier. Or this is the deposit expansion factor. So yeah, we'll call it the actual money multiplier. I guess I'm looking over here at my text just to check that I'm not getting off the reservation, and I just want to make sure I keep the terminology constant. It's called different things by different people. So this is a fairly simple calculation. Just take the 8,400. Uh-oh, I did a mistake here. Well, come on, Mr. Sipsic, wake up. What are you doing here? Yes, Mr. Sipsic makes mistakes. What do you see wrong here? What's wrong with my formula? It's inverted. Okay, so let's do that again. Let's take the actual money supply and let's divide it by the monetary base. Yay! I just got it right. And that gives us the actual money multiplier. Yay, I did it. Yeah. So what do we got here? We got 8,400 divided by 1,500. It's been a long day. No excuses though. I can handle this, and that should be 5.6. Okay, you can check that. That's 5.6. What does that mean? What does that mean? Okay, that's a good question. What does this 5.6 mean? Why have we calculated? Well, this is the ratio of the money supply to the monetary base. All right, 5.6 to 1. But what does that mean? All right, I'm going to give you a little foretaste before we wrap up this particular unit. But in the next unit, you're going to see how important this is. We can take AMS over MB. It never hurts to write it again. The more times you write it, the more likely you are to remember it. And we can rearrange that. You go, really? Yeah, we can say that that's the monetary base times the actual money multiplier equals the actual money supply. So we can just rearrange this. If you take the 1,500, the monetary base, and you multiply it by 5.6, you get the 8,400. So what this tells us is every dollar added to the monetary base is going to what? Add what to the actual money supply? $5.60. So this is actually the size of the multiplier effect. Remember we talked about a deposit going into a bank and that deposit multiplying. And I didn't quantify that in the last video. I didn't tell you how a dollar deposited can multiply the level of money in the banking system. But now I'm showing you this. So if you add $1 to the monetary base, you can add $5.60 to the actual money supply. And notice that this actual money multiplier is a function of a couple things. One, it's a function of how much currency is in circulation, because currency in circulation isn't circulating within the banking system. Okay? And it also has to do with how much banks are holding as reserves. So when banks are holding a lot of reserves and people are holding a lot of currency, the money multiplier is going to be relatively small. Let me go ahead and note that. So when the banking system has a high level of reserves and a high level of currency is currency in circulation. Remember, these are not the same. Reserves include what? Deposits with the Fed and currency in bank vaults. This is currency in circulation. So when there's a lot of currency holdings and a lot of reserves, the multiplier, the actual money multiplier, is going to be relatively low. You'll see this as we start playing with the data. Whereas if you turn that around and banks are not holding a lot of reserves against their deposits, and there's not a lot of currency in circulation. Currency in circulation is money outside the banking system. Then you're going to have a relatively high multiplier. So let's just go ahead and write that. So let me write it up here. So if there's relatively little reserves in the banking system, so banks aren't holding a lot of reserves, which means they're kind of living more on the edge. They're loaning out a lot. So if reserves are not very high and there's not a lot of currency in circulation, then what's the implication of that? You're going to have a high multiplier effect, high AMM. Okay, sorry for that, ran off the page. So this is very important material. I encourage you to take a look at it. There's some practice problems like this in your e-workbook, your 5th edition, and which is the edition we want you working on right now, but that edition will change. And all of my books have this, have this material in it. And you should be able to calculate first and foremost the monetary base. Then you should be able to calculate what? The actual money supply. And that's, the actual money multiplier. First of all, you're going to calculate the monetary base, the actual money supply, and then you should be able to calculate the actual money multiplier. And then you should be able to rearrange these. So once you have this and this, you should be able to get this. But once you can rearrange that, and you can talk about how a dollar added to the monetary base affects the actual money supply. Okay, we'll stop there. This is important stuff. It's thick. Make sure you take a look at it. And of course, if you have any questions, let me know. And the same material is in your e-workbook in topic 6 of Unit 2. Okay? I wish you well. Take care.